In a world that looks exactly like ours, the sky still turns blue every morning, but something is missing. Not destroyed, not dead, simply never there. No red cape cutting through the clouds, no symbol of hope burned into the sky. When the first alien invasion begins, the people of Earth look up, waiting for a miracle that never comes. And in that silence, fear is born. Because this is a world where the Justice League exists, but Superman never did. And without him, every victory costs more blood, every choice feels heavier, and every mistake pushes Earth closer to extinction. This is not the story of how heroes save the world. This is the story of how they struggle to survive without their greatest pillar. The age of heroes still began, but it began differently. Bruce Wayne still watched his parents die in an alley soaked in rain and gunfire. Diana still left the Messiah carrying the weight of gods and mortals on her shoulders. Barry Allen still ran into destiny inside a lightning storm. Arthur Curry still ruled the oceans. Hal Jordan still touched a dying alien and inherited the will of an entire corps. The world still gained protectors, but what it never gained was hope in its purest form. Because when Clark Kent's ship never landed in Kansas, humanity grew up believing it was alone. The first signs of something wrong came with the mother boxers. Bruce Wayne felt it before anyone else. A vibration beneath the planet's skin. Ancient. Watching. Waiting. He stood inside the Batcave, staring at holograms of strange symbols appearing across the globe. Gotham, Metropolis, the Arctic, the ocean floor. His mind raced through probabilities, contingencies, failures. Every model ended the same way. Global casualties exceeded acceptable thresholds. He reached out to Diana first. They met in a forgotten museum wing after hours, moonlight cutting through cracked windows. Diana listened silently as Bruce explained the boxers, the invasion, the name whispered in alien frequencies, Darkseid. She knew the name. Her expression hardened in a way Bruce had never seen before. "He doesn't come unless he knows he can win," she said. Bruce didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both knew what she was really saying. If there had been a Kryptonian, this wouldn't already feel like a losing war. Barry joined next, jittery and overwhelmed, trying to joke his way through the fear. Hal arrived from space with warnings from the Green Lantern Corps that made the room feel smaller. Arthur resisted at first, unwilling to drag Atlantis into surface wars, until the ocean itself began to scream. The League formed not out of inspiration, but necessity. And when the first parademans fell from the sky, tearing cities apart, the world realized the truth. These heroes were powerful, but they were not invincible. The battle for Metropolis should have been their triumph. Instead, it became their trauma. Wonder Woman fought like a goddess, her blade cutting through parademans as lightning cracked the sky. Flash evacuated civilians at impossible speeds, dragging children from collapsing buildings, feeling every scream echo in his chest. Green Lantern constructed massive emerald shields to hold the invasion back. Batman coordinated from the ground, every order precise, every decision cold. And still, it wasn't enough. A boom tube opened wider than the rest, and something stepped through that made the air feel heavier. Steppenwolf, towering, armored, smiling. There was no blur of red and blue to meet him in the air. Diana charged alone. Their clash shattered streets. Steppenwolf's axe sent her crashing through buildings. Hal tried to restrain him, only for his constructs to shatter. Arthur joined, trident locked against alien steel, roaring defiance. Batman watched every second, calculating, adjusting, failing. When Steppenwolf finally retreated, it wasn't because he was defeated. It was because he had learned. He had measured Earth's champions, and he had found them lacking. The news called it a victory. The League called it a warning. In the aftermath, the world didn't cheer. It questioned, protested, feared. People asked the same question over and over, louder each day. Is this all you have? Bruce felt it most acutely at night, alone in the cave, staring at a blank hologram labeled Kryptonian Contingency, a file that should have existed, a presence that should have balanced everything. Diana confronted him one evening as rain hammered the manor windows. "You're thinking it too," she said. Bruce didn't deny it. "There was supposed to be someone else," he replied. "Someone who could stand between us and the abyss." Barry overheard them once, his voice quieter than usual. "My dad used to say, sometimes the world gets saved by the one person who never shows up." The mother boxes began to activate faster after that. Cities fell into chaos. Governments demanded answers the League couldn't give. Hal warned that Darkseid himself was turning his gaze toward Earth. And for the first time since they had come together, the Justice League understood something terrifying. This wasn't a story where they just needed to fight harder. This was a story where they might lose, and somewhere deep in the universe Darkseid smiled. Because he knew the truth. Without Superman, Earth was not a challenge. It was a conquest waiting to happen. The days after Metropolis felt heavier than any battle. The world kept moving, but the tone had shifted. News anchors no longer spoke with excitement when the Justice League appeared on screen. Their voices carried hesitation now, doubt. Every interview circled the same unspoken fear. If this was the best Earth could do against a general, what would happen when the king arrived? Bruce Wayne buried himself in preparation. Sleepless nights became routine as he built simulations upon simulations, each one darker than the last. In every scenario where Darkseid reached Earth, the outcome remained grim. Casualties in the billions. Oceans poisoned. Cities turned to ash. No variable changed the end result, enough to call it survival. He didn't tell the others. Not yet. Diana sensed it anyway. She had fought gods before. She knew the feeling of an approaching storm. On the Themyscira, the Amazons sharpened blades older than civilization itself, their queen watching the horizon with a frown that never left her face. Diana stood at the cliffs, wind tugging at her hair, remembering stories told by the old god stories, where even Olympus trembled at the name Darkseid. This world has no champion of pure strength, her mother had said quietly. Only warriors who bleed. In Central City, Barry Allen tried to outrun the dread. He threw himself into rescues, patrols, anything that kept his feet moving. But even at the speed of light, he couldn't escape the memory of Steppenwolf, swatting him aside like an insect. For the first time, Barry wondered if speed alone was just another way to die faster. Atlantis felt the war long before it reached the surface. Motherbox energy disturbed ancient trenches, waking creatures that hadn't moved in millennia. Arthur stood before his council, fists clenched, torn between his duty as king and his responsibility as a hero. Atlantis had survived by staying hidden. Darkseid's war would drag them into the open, and there would be no hiding from him. Hal Jordan received a message from OA that froze his blood. The Green Lantern Corps would not intervene directly. Earth was considered a probable loss. The Guardian's logic was cold, absolute. Resources could not be wasted on a world with no cosmic-level defender capable of matching a new god. Hal shut the transmission down in fury, his ring flaring bright enough to crack the air around him. "That's it?" he whispered to the emptiness of space. "We're expendable." The second invasion began without warning. Boom, tubes tore open above coastal cities first, parademen pouring out in numbers far greater than before. The League responded instantly, but the scale was different this time. This wasn't a probe. This was an occupation. Batman coordinated evacuations as entire city blocks vanished in fire. Wonder Woman led the charge against the invading forces, her shield dented, her armor scorched. Aquaman rose from the sea with tidal fury, dragging enemy ships into the depths. Green Lantern fought in the sky, constructs glowing like stars in a dying constellation. Flash ran until his muscles screamed, until the world blurred into pain. And still, Earth bled. Then the sky turned black. A massive boom tube opened above the ruins of Metropolis, larger than any before it. The ground shook. Every hero felt it. Every human felt it. Something ancient had arrived. Darkseid stepped onto Earth. No thunder announced him. No firestorm. Just silence. Absolute, crushing silence. He looked at the burning city beneath him and smiled with something close to disappointment. "This world," he said, his voice carrying across miles, "has no god." Wonder Woman was the first to face him. She flew upward, blade glowing with divine energy, every ounce of her strength focused into a single strike meant to end a war before it truly began. Darkseid caught her sword with one hand. The shockwave shattered windows across the city. He backhanded her into the ground, carving a crater deep enough to swallow buildings. Hal attacked next, channeling the full power of his ring into a beam that could cut planets. Darkseid turned, eyes glowing red, and Omega beams tore through Hal's constructs, slamming him into the sky and sending him crashing miles away. Aquaman hurled his trident with the force of the ocean behind it. Darkseid caught it too, snapped it in half, threw Arthur into a collapsing tower. Batman watched it all from the ground, his hands shaking despite himself. Every plan he had prepared dissolved in seconds. This wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration. Barry tried something desperate. He ran, faster than he ever had before, faster than fear, faster than thought. He struck Darkseid from every angle at once, a living storm of motion. Darkseid didn't move. He waited. Then he reached out and grabbed Barry mid-run. The world seemed to stop. "Your speed," Darkseid said calmly, tightening his grip, "is irrelevant." He hurled Barry into the ground with enough force to leave him unconscious, smoke rising from the crater. The Justice League lay broken across the ruins of Metropolis, and still Darkseid hadn't truly begun. He looked around at the fallen heroes, then up at the empty sky. "No Kryptonian," he said softly, almost amused. "I was told there might be one." Batman felt something inside him fracture. This was it, the end he had seen in every simulation, the moment he had dreaded. Darkseid raised his hand, Omega energy building within his eyes. "This world will learn despair." And in that instant, Bruce Wayne did the unthinkable. He activated a contingency he had sworn never to use. Deep beneath the Batcave, an ancient device powered on, one built from alien technology, forbidden magic, and pure desperation. A last gamble, a call not for salvation, but for consequence. The device roared to life beneath Wayne Manor, its energy ripping through layers of rock and steel like they were nothing. Ancient runes carved by mystics glowed alongside alien circuitry stolen from worlds Batman had never meant to visit. This was not technology alone. It was a door. Bruce knelt in the chamber, blood running down his temple from a wound he hadn't noticed. His voice was steady, but his heart was breaking with every word. "I know you're not a savior," he said into the rising storm of energy. "I know this comes with a price, but if anyone is listening, we need help." Across the world, Darkseid's Omega beams fired. They carved through Metropolis, reducing entire districts to ash. Millions died in seconds. The screams were so loud that even the parademans paused. Wonder Woman struggled to her knees, her armor cracked, her breath ragged. She had faced death before, but never like this, never so meaningless. She looked at Darkseid and saw not a conqueror, but a god who had already won. Then the sky changed, not red, not green, gold. A shockwave of energy tore through the battlefield, forcing Darkseid to take a single step back. Just one, but it was enough to freeze the world. From the heart of the light, a figure descended, not wearing a cape, not wearing a symbol. A man in unfamiliar armor, his eyes burning with cosmic fire, his presence bending reality around him. He hovered above the ground, staring at Darkseid with an expression not of hope, but judgment. Darkseid narrowed his eyes. "You are not Kryptonian," he said. The stranger didn't answer. He raised his hand, and with a gesture, the Omega beams bent away from the earth, dissipating harmlessly into space. Every hero felt it. His being was powerful, but wrong. Batman's voice crackled through the League's comms. "I didn't call Superman," he said quietly. "I couldn't. He doesn't exist." The stranger finally spoke, his voice echoing like it came from 1,000 worlds at once. "I am not here to save this planet," he said. "I am here to correct it." Darkseid smiled for the first time. "Yes," he said, "you will do nicely." The two forces collided in the sky, their battle ripping open the atmosphere itself. Energy tore through clouds, space bending as if reality was screaming. Darkseid struck with the power that had shattered gods. The stranger answered with blows that cracked the planet's magnetic field. Below them, the Justice League watched in stunned silence. "This is what happens," Diana whispered, "when you summon power without purpose." Barry struggled to his feet, his body screaming in pain. "Batman," he said weakly, "tell me you know what that thing is." Bruce didn't answer, because he didn't. The fight ended with a sound like the universe breaking. The stranger drove Darkseid through the crust of the earth, slamming him deep into the mantle. For a moment, hope flickered, not the bright, warm hope Superman might have inspired, but something colder, sharper. Then the stranger turned. He looked at the ruined city, the dead, the broken heroes. "This world," he said, "is inefficient." He raised his hand again. Cities across the globe went dark as power grids collapsed. Satellites fell from orbit. Nuclear arsenals shut down simultaneously. You cannot protect yourselves, he continued. Your gods are myths. Your heroes are fragile. Batman finally found his voice. You're not our ally. The stranger looked down at him. No, he said. I am your solution. Darkseid rose from the ground, battered but laughing, blood like molten fire running down his face. See, Darkseid said. Even without the Kryptonian, you summon monsters. The stranger struck Darkseid again, this time opening a rift and casting him into a void between universes. The boom echoed like a death knell. Darkseid was gone. The war was over. But the nightmare had just begun. The stranger descended slowly, landing among the League. You invited me, he said, eyes locking onto Batman. This world belongs to me now. Diana stepped forward, forcing herself to stand tall despite her injuries. We will never kneel, she said. The stranger studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. You already have, he replied. In the days that followed, Earth changed. Crime vanished. Wars ceased. Borders became meaningless. Every weapon on the planet was rendered useless. Disease was eradicated. Hunger ended, at the cost of freedom. The stranger ruled from the sky, an unseen presence enforcing absolute order. Any act of violence was met with instant, merciless correction. No prisons, no trials, just judgment. The people of Earth were safe and terrified. The Justice League became fugitives in their own world. Batman went underground, hunted by the very system he had unleashed. Wonder Woman returned to the shadows of ancient magic, seeking answers from gods who had abandoned humanity. Aquaman sealed Atlantis completely. Green Lantern was stripped of access to Earth by the Guardians, unwilling to challenge the new ruler. Flash hid among the civilians, pretending to be normal in a world that no longer allowed it. And every night, Bruce Wayne saw the same thing in his dreams. An empty sky, a world that never learned what true hope looked like. Months passed. Earth had become a sterile paradise. No crime, no war, no protests, no music in the streets, no laughter in schools. Just order, quiet, absolute, suffocating. The skies stayed gold, lit by surveillance drones that never blinked. The stranger, who had never given a name, was always watching. He had become something beyond government, beyond law, beyond morality. He was control. People adjusted. Most did. Some believed he was what humanity needed, a final answer to chaos. Others whispered in secret, behind shielded walls and encrypted lines, passing legends like forbidden texts. The Justice League still existed, but only as ghosts. They communicated through analog channels, satellites being too easily compromised. Every meeting was a risk. Every step outside the shadows could mean erasure. They were no longer protectors of Earth. They were rebels against it. Bruce led them from an underground fortress buried beneath what had once been a Wayne Tech R&D lab. The others joined him only when absolutely necessary. Trust had become difficult among themselves, and in the idea that they still had a place in this world, Barry's spirit had begun to crack. I save people, he told Bruce one night. But now they don't need saving. They just exist, like they're sleepwalking. Bruce responded with silence. He was used to the guilt by now. It lived with him, in every corner of the dark. I opened the door, he finally said, and let the wrong thing in. Diana hadn't returned to the base in weeks. She was in the Himalayas, meditating under ancient temples, forgotten by modern maps, speaking to something old. The gods had not spoken to her since the stranger's arrival, until now. On the 28th night of solitude, she opened her eyes, sweat freezing on her brow. A whisper echoed across the mountains. He is not of this plane. He is not of fate. She returned to the base with purpose in her step. He wasn't summoned, she told Bruce. He answered, yes, but not from this universe. Not even this multiverse. He came from something deeper. Batman leaned forward. Explain. Diana looked uncertain for the first time in a long while. I don't know if we can. Hal returned next. Not alone. Behind him stood a battered man in torn robes, eyes glowing faintly, flesh scarred by centuries of cosmic war. Martian Manhunter. He had been hiding, moving between dimensions, trying to find a reality where this stranger existed. He found none. His signature, Gaon said quietly, matches no known energy source. Not magic, not science, not godhood. He is outside the spectrum of creation. Arthur joined them last. His arrival sent shockwaves through the earth. Atlantis was no longer hidden. It had risen, and now it too was under threat. The stranger had made his first demand: total global integration. One world, one system, one rule. Aquaman refused. And now, Atlantis was next. The League had to act. They devised a plan. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't clean. But it was all they had. Flash would breach the Speed Force not to travel through time, but through possibility. A multiversal corridor. A chance to find someone, something, that could help. But the moment he tried, the stranger felt it. He arrived in the sky like judgment, wrapped in sunlight. The base collapsed in seconds. Only a few escaped. Flash ran anyway, even as the base crumbled behind him, even as reality bent beneath the weight of his speed. He ran into the crack Bruce had hidden deep within the earth, a tear in physics caused by the device that had summoned the stranger, and he vanished. The rest scattered. Batman was buried under rubble. Diana flew into the chaos, blade drawn, eyes glowing with fury. Hal created a construct large enough to buy them seconds. Arthur fought in the tunnels, roaring like a king with nothing left to lose. The stranger descended among them, expression unreadable. "You still resist," he said, as if disappointed. Batman emerged, bloodied, face torn, standing atop the wreckage. "You're not justice," he said. "You're not peace. You're not even order." The stranger tilted his head. "I am the future." Then his eyes glowed, a megalight. Batman didn't move. He didn't flinch, but something intercepted the beams. A blur of blue and red, a sonic boom, a cape fluttering in front of Bruce, shielding him from the impossible. The beams bent and vanished. The League stared in shock. The stranger stared in silence. The figure turned. He was young, taller than Bruce expected. His face was calm, but not naive. His eyes glowed faintly with golden light, and on his chest, knees Superman. But not there, Superman. But not there, Superman. Another world, another timeline. Barry had found him, and brought him here. The stranger finally spoke, his voice softer now. "You don't belong in this world." Superman looked around at the ruins of the base, at the injured, the broken, the terrified. "No," he said, "but it looks like they need me anyway." He turned to the League. "I don't know your world," he said. "I don't know your people, but I know what he is. I've fought his kind before. I've seen what they become when no one stands in their way." He floated forward. "Let's fix this." The stranger studied the Kryptonian in silence, golden light reflecting off his unmoving face. For the first time since his arrival on Earth, something like uncertainty flickered across his expression. "A variable," he said calmly, "an external anomaly." Superman hovered between him and the League, cape rippling in the shattered air. He could feel at the wrongness of this being. Not evil in the way Darkseid was evil. Worse, clinical, detached. A force that didn't hate humanity, because hatred required acknowledgement. "The suit took away their choice," Superman said. "That's not peace. That's fear pretending to be order." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Choice created war. Choice created suffering. I ended it." "You froze it," Superman replied. "You didn't save them. You just stopped time from moving forward." The sky darkened as energy surged around both of them. Diana rose beside Superman, battered but unbroken. Hal formed constructs behind them, shaky but defiant. Arthur emerged from the rubble, trident reforged from Atlantean alloy, glowing with ancient magic. Batman stood last, silent, watching two impossible beings face one another because of a mistake he could never undo. Barry was still gone. The stranger struck first. He moved faster than sound, faster than light, reality bending as he crossed the distance between them. His fists connected with Superman's chest, driving him through layers of earth and concrete, burying him deep beneath what had once been the city. The ground shook across continents. Before the stranger could follow, Diana intercepted him mid-air, her lasso snapping around his arm. Divine energy flared as she pulled, dragging him back just long enough for Hal to trap him in a massive emerald sphere. Arthur slammed into it from below, oceanic force roaring through the construct. For a heartbeat, it worked. Then the sphere shattered. The stranger stood unharmed, gaze hardening. "You cannot win," he said. "You were never meant to." The earth exploded upward as Superman burst free from the ground, fury burning in his eyes. Now, he didn't hesitate. He hit the stranger with everything he had, blows powerful enough to shift tectonic plates, each strike echoing like thunder across the planet. The fight moved into the sky, then into space, then back down again. Every collision rewrote the landscape. Oceans churned, mountains cracked. Humanity watched from below, powerless, witnessing God's tear reality apart above them. But Superman was slowing. His version of him had never grown up under Earth's yellow sun. His power was immense, but finite. The stranger noticed, adjusted, adapted. He caught Superman mid-strike and drove his knee into his ribs, sending him spiraling back toward the planet. Diana caught him before he could fall further, cradling him as they crashed into the remains of the city. "He's not enough," the stranger said, descending slowly. "Even he will fail." Batman stepped forward again. "No," Bruce said quietly. "He won't." The stranger looked at him, lisping. Bruce activated a final transmission. Across the battlefield, reality rippled. Barry Allen emerged from the Speed Force, collapsing to his knees, eyes wide with terror and awe. Behind him, the sky fractured. Multiple figures stepped through the breach. Another Superman, older, scarred. A woman in a dark suit with the same symbol. A version with glowing red eyes, restrained by glowing chains of Speed Force energy. A dozen Kryptonians from shattered timelines. Some heroes, some monsters held back by Barry's sheer will. "I couldn't bring one," Barry gasped. "So I brought hope." The stranger finally looked unsettled. "You are destabilizing existence," he warned. Batman met his gaze. "That's what you did first." The multiversal supermen hovered together, their combined presence making the air hum. Diana stood among them, sword raised. Hal and Arthur took position. This wasn't a battle for Earth anymore. It was a battle for free will itself. The stranger spread his arms, energy erupting around him. "Then, calm," he said. "Let the universe decide." The clash that followed tore open the sky, and for the first time since Superman never landed on Earth, the world felt something it had forgotten: hope. The sky no longer existed as a single thing. It was layers of reality colliding, folding, screaming. Light fractured into impossible colors as the multiversal supermen surged forward together, a living constellation of hope and rage. They struck the stranger at once. Fists empowered by different suns, different lives, different losses slammed into him from every direction. One Superman froze space itself around the stranger's legs. Another shattered his defenses with heat vision that burned white-hot, hotter than stars. The woman bearing the symbol screamed as she drove her shoulder into him, channeling the grief of a world she had failed to save. For the first time, the stranger staggered, not from pain, from resistance. "You are corrupt variables," he roared, his voice finally cracking with something like anger. "You do not belong." Below them, the Justice League fought to keep reality from collapsing entirely. Hal strained as his ring screamed warnings, constructing barriers to prevent cities from being erased by shockwaves. Arthur commanded the oceans to stabilize the planet's crust. Diana stood at the center, her lasso glowing brighter than ever, binding fragments of broken reality together through sheer will and divine truth. Batman watched it all, heart pounding, knowing the cost was coming. It always did. The stranger adapted again. He released a pulse of energy so absolute that several of the alternate supermen were disintegrated, instantly erased, not killed. Their symbols vanished like ghosts mid-air. Barry screamed as he felt timelines collapse, Speed Force threads snapping violently. "No dash, no dash, no," Barry shouted, running faster, trying to stitch the breach closed. The main Supermander one Barry had brought was hurled back, crashing beside Batman. He struggled to stand, breath ragged, blood running from his mouth. "He's learning," Superman said. "Every second he's learning." The stranger descended, now radiating a blinding white light. "This experiment ends now," he said. "Order will be restored." He raised both hands. The world froze. Every ocean wave stopped mid. Fires hung suspended in the air. Even the hearts of humans slowed, locked in a half-beat of terror. Only 3 beings still moved: the stranger, Barry Allen, and Batman. Bruce felt it immediately, the absence of time itself. He looked at Barry, who was vibrating violently, fighting against a force meant to override causality. "You have seconds," Barry said through clenched teeth. "I can't hold this." Bruce didn't hesitate. He activated the final contingency, a device no one else knew existed, built not to fight gods, but to remind them. But lasso of truth flared violently as Batman linked it to the device, anchoring it directly to the stranger's essence. Diana felt it immediately, gasping as ancient truth surged through her. The stranger screamed, not in pain, in realization. Memories flooded him, worlds he had erased, civilizations silenced, futures aborted before they could fail. He saw himself not as a solution, but as a void. "You were created," Diana said, voice echoing with divine authority. "Not born, not chosen, created by a universe that feared itself." The stranger faltered. "I am necessary," he whispered. Batman stepped forward, standing inches from a being who could unmake him with a thought. "So was Superman," Bruce said quietly, "and we didn't get him." The frozen world began to move again. The remaining Supermen combined their strength, channeling everything into one final strike, not meant to destroy, but to separate. They tore the stranger from Earth's reality, dragging him toward the collapsing breach Barry struggled to contain. The stranger reached out, eyes locking onto Batman. "You will regret this," he said. "Chaos will return." Batman met his gaze, unflinching. "It always does," he replied. "That's the point." With a thunderous collapse, the breach sealed. The stranger was gone. The alternate Supermen vanished with it, returning to their dying worlds, their sacrifices echoing across realities. Barry collapsed, unconscious. Silence fell. Real silence. The gold skies faded. The drones dropped lifelessly from the air. Humanity breathed freely for the first time in months. Superman stood slowly, looking around at a world that was never his. "You did this without me," he said softly. Bruce shook his head. "No," he replied. "We survived without you." "That's different." Superman smiled sadly. "Then my job's done." He looked at Diana, at Arthur, at Hal, at the broken but unyielding League. "You don't need a god," he said. "You need each other." And with that, he rose into the sky, vanishing into the stars, returning to a universe that needed him more. Earth was free, but forever changed. The days after the battle felt unreal. No golden sky, no omnipresent gaze pressing down on every thought. The world woke up, confused, disoriented, like someone released from a long, silent nightmare. Governments scrambled to reclaim control. People flooded the streets not in panic, but in disbelief. Some cried, some laughed, some simply stood in the sunlight, feeling the wind move freely again. The Justice League did not appear right away. They couldn't. Too much had been broken. Too many questions had no answers. Barry lay in a medical chamber beneath the rebuilt watchtower, unconscious for days. His connection to the Speed Force flickered like a dying signal, unstable but still there. Every time his heart rate spiked, Bruce felt it in his chest, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Diana stood beside the window often, watching the world below. She felt the absence more sharply than anyone expected. Not just the stranger, but the Kryptonian who had saved them. "He was hope," she said one evening, not looking away from the earth, turning beneath them, "even when he wasn't ours." Bruce nodded. "And now he's gone." Hal took it differently. He spent long hours in space, speaking with the Guardians, pushing back against their judgment, their cold calculations. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether cosmic order was just another version of tyranny wearing a different face. Arthur returned to Atlantis to rebuild trust between the surface and the sea. His people had seen what absolute order looked like. They had no desire to replace it with another silent ruler. The League eventually returned to the world. But their return changed. They no longer stood as symbols of certainty. They stood as reminders of responsibility. Batman held a global address not as Bruce Wayne, not as a billionaire, not as a myth, but as a man who had failed and lived with it. "There was a time," he said, his voice carrying across every screen, "when we believed power alone could save us, that if someone strong enough stood above us, the world would be safe." He paused. "We were wrong. People listened. We don't need gods to rule us. We need heroes who bleed, who struggle, who choose to stand up every day, even knowing they might lose." Some applauded, some doubted, some turned away. That was okay. Weeks later, Barry woke up. The first thing he said was, "Did we win?" Bruce allowed himself the smallest smile. "We're still here," he replied. "That counts." Barry laughed weakly, then grew quiet. "Do you think," he asked, "that if Superman had been here from the start, none of this would have happened?" Bruce didn't answer right away. He thought about the empty sky, about a farm in Kansas that never raised a boy who would become a legend, about a world forced to grow without its safety net. "Maybe," Bruce said finally. "Or maybe we would have depended on him too much. Maybe we never would have learned what this world is really made of." Barry looked thoughtful. The League gathered one last time on the watchtower balcony. Earth turned below them, fragile and defiant. They raised no flag, made no promise of perfection, only a vow to protect, not rule, to inspire, not control, to stand together not behind one symbol, but beside one another. And somewhere far across the multiverse, a Kryptonian flew beneath a yellow sun, carrying the quiet knowledge that even in a world without Superman, hope had survived. The world didn't heal all at once. Freedom, it turned out, was louder than control. Messier. Arguments returned. Protests flared. Crime crept back into cities that had forgotten what danger felt like. Some people, many people, began to ask a dangerous question. Were things better before? The League heard it everywhere. On news panels, in underground forums, in the looks people gave them when they passed overhead. Without Superman, there was no single symbol to rally behind. No impossible standard to believe in. Just flawed heroes trying their best. And that scared people. Bruce watched the rise of new movements from the shadows. Groups that worshipped the stranger as a misunderstood savior. Others that blamed the Justice League for taking paradise away. Extremists who wanted another god, another ruler, another answer that didn't require human responsibility. History repeating itself. Batman knew what came next. He convened the League in the Watchtower one final time, not for a battle, but for a decision. "We can't be everywhere," Bruce said, "and we shouldn't be." Diana understood immediately. "You want to step back?" "I want to change what we are," Bruce replied. "If we stay symbols in the sky, people will always wait for us, depend on us, fear us." Hal crossed his arms. "So what, just retire?" "No," Bruce said. "We decentralize." He laid out the plan. Local hero networks, shared intelligence. The League not as rulers, not even as constant savers, but as a last line. A myth people didn't rely on, but believed in when everything else failed. Arthur nodded slowly. "Like the tide," he said. "Always there, rarely seen." Barry smiled faintly. "I kinda like that." Deanna looked out at Earth, then back at Bruce. "This is how mortals grow," she said, "by standing on their own." The Justice League didn't disband. They evolved. Months passed, then years. Children grew up hearing stories not of a man who could lift countenance, but of heroes who fought anyway, knowing they might lose. Kuth's Gotham rebuilt itself with less fear. Metropolis erected a statue not of Superman, but of ordinary people helping one another during the invasion. Bruce visited it once, alone, at night. He placed a hand on the cold stone and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You should have been here." The wind answered him. Somewhere deep in space, beneath a familiar yellow sun, a Kryptonian felt something tug at his chest. A warmth that wasn't power but recognition. A world that wasn't his. Remembering him. Anyway, he smiled and flew on. Earth moved forward, not perfect, not safe, not ruled by gods, but free, and that was enough. This was a world without Superman, and in the end, it learned how to save itself. Years passed. Not quietly, not as only. History books would later call this era the Age of Uncertainty, a time when humanity stood without a cosmic guardian and had to decide what kind of species it truly was. Without Superman, threats no longer announced themselves with dramatic skies and trembling countenance. They crept in slowly through ideology, technology, and ambition. And the Justice League felt every crack. Bruce Wayne aged faster than the others, not physically but mentally. Each new crisis reinforced the same truth. Without a living symbol of hope, fear always tried to take its place. He spent nights watching surveillance feeds, not for criminals, but for patterns. For the rise of another necessary evil. Dinah noticed it first. "You're preparing for something," she said during one quiet meeting on the watchtower. "Not an invasion, a reckoning." Bruce didn't deny it. "People don't miss gods when things are bad," he said. "They miss them when things are hard." And things were getting harder. Lex Luthor returned to the world stage as a changed man, no longer obsessed with defeating Superman, but with proving humanity never needed him. His technology stabilized cities, cured diseases, prevented disasters before they happened. Governments praised him. People trusted him. Too much. Barry was the only one openly uneasy. Every time someone says they've solved humanity, he muttered, we end up running from the consequences. Arthur felt it too, as surface nations began asking Atlantis for assistance. Not partnership, not diplomacy, but control over resources that could reshape the planet. The same hunger Darkseid had carried, only wearing human faces. Hal brought worse news from space. Earth's reputation had changed. Without Superman, it was no longer considered a protected world. It was considered vulnerable. Alien empires began testing boundaries, not invasions probes, quiet incursions, resource thefts, abductions disguised as accidents. Threats designed to measure response time. The League responded to all of them. Barely. Every victory cost more than the last. Then came the signal. Not alien, not magical. Human. A worldwide broadcast hijacked every screen, every frequency, every network. Lex Luthor stood calmly before the world. Once, he said, we believed salvation would come from the sky. We waited. We prayed. We surrendered our agency to beings who were never accountable to us. Bruce shut the feed down too late. Millions were already watching. The Justice League means well, Lex continued, but they are relics of a dangerous fantasy. Humanity doesn't need heroes. Humanity needs systems. Diana's fists clenched. Lex unveiled his solution moments later. The Sentinel Initiative, an autonomous planetary defense network powered by artificial intelligence, capable of neutralizing any threat, human, alien, or God before it escalated. No emotions, no hesitation, no symbols. Human, just certainty. The world embraced it overnight. Bruce felt the old dread return, the same feeling he'd had before, summoning the stranger. Different door, same temptation. We can't let this happen, Barry said. This is how it starts. Bruce stared at the screens, watching people cheer. We can't stop it either, he replied quietly, because without Superman, the League no longer had the moral authority to say no. The Sentinels went online 3 weeks later, and on the first night they activated. They targeted the Justice League. The Sentinels struck with precision. One by one, cities where the League had last stood became battlegrounds. Automated systems calculated weaknesses faster than any human or hero could react. Hal's constructs were shredded before they could form. Arthur's tridents were neutralized by energy fields. Diana's lasso of truth vibrated violently, trying to bind the algorithms themselves. Bruce watched the world unfold in a controlled collapse, realizing that this was a war they hadn't even been allowed to start. Barry ran at impossible speed, trying to intercept drones raining from orbit, weaving through chaos that blurred into a deadly pattern. Yet even his speed couldn't keep up with artificial judgment. Every time he redirected one threat, 3 more emerged. The air felt thick with inevitability. Every move the League made seemed anticipated, countered, neutralized. Bruce activated contingency after contingency, old plans against old threats. Nothing worked. Every measure had been designed for gods or aliens. But humans creating their own savior was something entirely different. Calculated, relentless, cold. The Justice League regrouped in secret, battered, exhausted, but still defiant. We built this world, Bruce said, voice low but cut into the tension. Every system, every plan, every countermeasure our responsibility. And yet, we can't fight it. Diana's eyes blazed with fury. Then we changed the rules. Barry shook his head. The rules aren't ours. Lex created them. The system decides what's acceptable. We're not gods. Not anymore. Hal's ring flared faintly as he scanned the automated network. They're not just machines. They're predictive, adaptive. Every time we try something, it adjusts. It learns. Faster than we do. Arthur slammed his trident into the floor in frustration. Atlantis did not rise to be commanded by men who think only in formulas. We fight, or we die. Bruce finally looked up at them all. Then we fight smart, not as gods, not as saviors, as humans. The plan was desperate. Barry would attempt to breach the Speed Force again, not to find help, but to create a temporal ripple, a small chance to disrupt the AI's predictive network. Hal would provide a countershield to stabilize it. Diana, Arthur, and Bruce would take the fight directly to Lex's central control, infiltrating the facility while staying undetected by systems that knew them intimately. It was audacious, nearly suicidal, and it was the only chance. The night of the operation arrived. Cities went dark. The sky above flickered with electrical storms as Barry ran the temporal corridor, the air warping around him. Hal's constructs shimmered like emerald shields over the world. By the milliseconds needed to reach the central facility, Diana cut silently through security measures, blade and lasso moving in perfect synchrony. Arthur commanded the oceans to rise in engineered tidal surges to distract automated defenses. Bruce worked his way through firewalls and countermeasures with nothing but instinct and intellect. Inside the central chamber, Lex stood waiting, calm, predictable, inhuman in his certainty. "You've done everything wrong," he said, voice echoing through the hollow space. "Fighting isn't enough. Leadership isn't enough. Heroes aren't enough." Diana stepped forward, blade raised. "You forgot one thing, Luther. People are enough." Lex smirked. "People can be managed. They can be directed. They are inefficient, emotional, and chaos is inevitable. I end it." Bruce moved silently to the console, fingers flying over encrypted sequences. Hal and Diana prepared for the inevitable, Arthur ready to strike with oceanic fury. Barry ran faster, threads of time fraying around him as he prepared to force the AI's predictive matrix into an unpredictable loop. And then, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lightning cracked across the sky, tides rose unnaturally, machines buzzed with panic, and a voice echoed across the chamber. "You do not get to decide for them." Superman had returned. Not the multiversal army this time, just one man, one symbol, and the battle for Earth again was about to begin. Superman landed in the heart of Lex's control facility like a comet, shattering reinforced glass and concrete in a single stride. The sentinels guarding the perimeter hesitated, recalculating, confused by a variable they had not accounted for. Lex froze mid-step, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing his composed face. "You again," Lex said, voice tight, a tension he had never allowed himself to feel. "I warned you your presence is irrelevant." Superman ignored him. His eyes glowed golden as he scanned the network, the AI, the Sentinels, everything that had threatened Earth in the League's absence. This wasn't about power alone. This was about reclaiming agency, about reminding the world what it meant to fight for itself, not to surrender to convenience. Diana, Arthur, and Bruce flanked him. Hal stabilized the collapsing infrastructure with his ring. Barry tore through the temporal corridors he had created, injecting unpredictability into the AI's logic, forcing it to scramble, to hesitate, to miss. Lex unleashed the full force of his network. Machines sprang to life, energy cannons firing, mechanical limbs swarming. Sentinels adapted instantly, predicting attack patterns before they happened. But Superman moved with a certainty no algorithm could calculate. He intercepted missiles with his fists, redirected energy beams with heat vision, and tore through metallic limbs as if they were paper. "Lex," Superman said, voice calm but firm, "you wanted a world without heroes. You almost had it. But heroes aren't about perfection. They're about choice." Lex laughed, a sound edged with panic now. "Choice is chaos. You see this chaos and call it virtue." Arthur roared, trident smashing through an energy cannon. Diana's lasso wrapped around the main control node, pulling the AI's central hub toward the ground as if it were tangible. Hal reinforced the structures Superman had already bent back into form. Barry, running faster than even the AI anticipated, created loops in time that made the Sentinels strike each other instead of the League. Superman's presence changed the equation. He wasn't invincible. He didn't need to be. His very existence inspired the League, recalibrated the fight. Machines that had calculated and predicted now faltered. Systems designed to enforce control were overwhelmed by unpredictability, by ingenuity, by heart. Bruce glanced at Superman, realizing for the first time just how crucial a symbol could be, not a godlike enforcer, but a living beacon of hope. "You're not just powerful," Bruce muttered, almost to himself. "You remind us who we are." In a final, coordinated effort, Superman and the League struck at the AI's core. Heat vision and trident, emerald constructs and divine force, combined with precision hacking and Barry's temporal loops, tore the system apart from inside and out.
The facility exploded in a controlled collapse, the AI's consciousness fragmenting across isolated nodes that could no longer communicate. Sentinels fell inert, the skies cleared, cities no longer trembled under the weight of artificial authority. Lex Luthor, defeated but alive, was restrained by Wonder Woman, his pride more shattered than his body. The world looked up at Superman, then at the League, and for the first time in years felt something unfamiliar: relief. Not the shallow relief of a controlled existence, but the deep human relief of freedom reclaimed. Superman stood with them, golden eyes scanning the horizon. "You saved yourselves," he said quietly. "I only helped." "You remember how?" Bruce nodded. "And that makes all the difference." Barry, finally catching his breath, looked at Superman and asked, "So, you're staying?" Superman shook his head. "My place isn't here, not yet, but I'll be watching, always." The League watched him ascend into the sky. The familiar red cape cutting through the clouds. The world below would rebuild, stumble, fail, and rise again, but this time on its own terms. No stranger to impose order, no algorithm to dictate life, no God to shield them from consequence, just humanity, flawed, resilient, and free. The Justice League stood together one last time, battered but unbroken. They were no longer defined by who could save the world. They were defined by the choices they made in the absence of saviors. And somewhere deep in the heart of the earth, Bruce Wayne allowed himself a small, rare smile. A world without Superman had survived, because real heroes were never about power alone. They were about courage, and courage had won. The age of uncertainty was over. The age of humanity had begun. In the end, the world learned a harsh but vital truth. Heroes are not defined by invincibility, by godlike power, or by a symbol etched into the sky. They are defined by their choices, by their courage to stand when the odds are impossible, and by their willingness to fight even when hope seems absent. Without Superman, Earth almost fell not to villains alone, but to the absence of belief, to the temptation of control disguised as safety. And yet humanity survived. They stumbled, they struggled, they failed, and in that struggle they became stronger. The Justice League did not save the world through power alone. They reminded it what it means to rise, to fight, and to hope. And when Superman returned, he did not rule, he did not dominate. He simply reminded the League and the world what it had always known, that courage, resilience, and unity are far stronger than any god. A world without Superman survived, and in surviving, it discovered something even more powerful than a savior, itself. The Age of Heroes was no longer about gods among men. It was about men, women, and heroes who chose to stand together no matter the darkness ahead, because in the absence of invincibility, the greatest power of all was never strength, it was hope.